Good morning. Welcome to our Sunday service. My name is Jack Lohr, and I'm a member of the trustees, if I can say that now, at the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood. I want to say a special thank you to my collaborator, Ron Levy, and to our singer, Kristen Plumley. Thanks also to Olas Karianis, the field ed student at USR, for creating and running the PowerPoint. The rest of our team will be acknowledged along the way. In this virtual gathering, we are wide scattered, but our home base in Ridgewood, to which we do hope to return soon, is on the original land of the Lenape people, some of whose descendants live today in Western Ontario, and others live in two federally recognized Lenape tribes in Oklahoma, the Delaware Tribe of Indians and the Delaware Tribe of Western Oklahoma. We confess that our lands were stolen and or taken by deceit. Let's take a breath in silence to connect and honor the land and her indigenous people. Just breathe in and breathe out. We also confess that we are beneficiaries of forced labor of enslaved Africans. Some people, like me, have discovered ancestors in our family trees who claimed to own other human beings. And all of us, given what we know about the history of the state of New Jersey in this matter, can see how complicated the subject is. We say this not to feel guilty, but so that our service may begin with the beauty of honesty. We have been gathering as a religious community for over a century. We are united by our commitment to relationship rather than creed, and by our shared Unitarian Universalist values, committed to the search for truth, meaning, and justice, and determined to create a community of trust, warmth, and joy, covenanted to live together in love. We affirm all people, no matter their age, sexual orientation, education, history, race, ethnicity, economic status, mental or physical health, gender, or body. We are grateful for the differences among us, celebrating the richness of varied perspectives. We attend intentionally to the dynamics of oppression and prejudice in our interactions with each other and in our congregational system. We believe that love has the power to heal and transform us all. Just a couple of announcements. Next Sunday, our racial justice team will be offering a reflection on the Tulsa massacre and its aftermath. The Reverend Dr. Marlon Levenhar, senior minister at All Souls Unitarian Church, Tulsa, who also has family connections to USR, will be our guide. And secondly, Share the Plate is back at USR. All summer, 50% of our Sunday collection will be donated to the Center for Food Action. You can find them at cfanj.org. CFA's programs include the Emergency Food Program, Homelessness Prevention, Weekend Snacks, and Smile Packs, which are dental supplies for kids. If this is your first time visiting, welcome. If you'd like to learn more about us, you can get connected to our weekly emails, check our website, or contact Anne, our congregational administrator, at usr.membership1@gmail.com. We would also love for you to fill out the Google form that is going to be dropped in the chat so that we can follow up with you. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. So now, breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. And listen for the sound of the bell. It is the voice of the enlightened one, the sound of the rising tide, the vibration that can bring healing and focus to our being. This sound calls us back to our true self. So attend and listen. So I don't know about the rest of you. I'd have to look in the chat to see if we are hearing the sound on those videos. But I'm sure you can hear me at this point. So let me begin with our opening words. Today, July 11th, is World Population Day, an observance established in 1989 by the Governing Council of the United Nations Development Program. The annual event is designed to raise awareness of global population issues, covering a wide range of topics, including aging, capacity development, family planning, fertility and marriage, international migration, mortality, population policies, population trends, urbanization, and sustainable development goals. But when I think world population, I think back over 50 years to when Janice and I were getting married. We wanted a larger family than either one of us had come from, and 4 seemed like the perfect number. But we were also students of The Population Bomb, a book that in 1968 told us we'd have apocalyptic famines and environmental disaster no later than 1984. Our concern about world population helped us decide to adopt to and have to. Back when most of us were in elementary school, we learned that the global population was approaching 3 billion people. Today, the world has 7.8 billion, and by 2050, the UN estimates that we will have reached 10 billion. Would you say that's enough? Or too many? Or perhaps not enough? It turns out that today, the numbers could actually be turning around. Consider a 2021 book by Shanna Swan and Stacy Colino. It's called Countdown: How Our Modern World is Threatening Sperm Counts, Altering Male and Female Reproductive Development, and Imperiling the Future of the Human Race. Janice and I made our family plans freely, unlike people living today in China, who were, until recently, told only 1 or 2 if you're rural and the first one is a girl. And earlier this year, we're told have 3. Still, the UN says that might not be enough to deal with the declining birth rates in China. China will lose 67 million working age people by 2030, while simultaneously doubling the number of elderly. That could put immense pressure on the economy and the government resources. So boom or bust? What's ahead for world population? You may already have opinions about today's topic, but we'll invite you to look deeper and consider where our views come from. We want to ask, are we truly living our first principle and affirming the inherent worth and dignity of every person?
Please join us in singing our hymn, Is There One Who Feels Unworthy? The words will be on your screen. Is there one who feels unworthy? Is there one who feels alone? Is there one who feels uncared for? Is there one who feels Is there one who's been rejected, left alone or left behind, walking through the lonesome valley, where no hope is hard to find? Oh, I find a place at table with a people called by grace, and to be sought and nurtured in this gentle, loving space. Here in this holy place, here in this gentle space, there is no lack of grace. Here in this holy place. We've so often failed at loving, and in hurt compassion's wrong, trying back the hand of mercy. We have built dividing walls. Now we come to ask forgiveness and to claim renewing grace, and to say that all are welcome at this table in this place. Here in this holy place, here in this gentle space, there is no lack of grace. Here in this holy place, here in this holy place, here in this gentle space, there is no lack of grace. Here in this holy place.
Good morning. I'm Janice Lohr. The first reading is from the last of Frank Bruni's regular opinion columns in the New York Times. Starting, well, now, I'm a columnist no more. I've taken a job in academia and will split my time between teaching and writing. Maybe that's best. 10 years is a long haul in any assignment, and while this one has been amply challenging and deeply rewarding, I always had misgivings. I worried and continue to worry about the degree to which I and other journalists, opinion writers especially, have contributed to the dynamics we decry, the toxic tenor of American discourse, the furious pitch of American politics, the volume and vitriol of it all. I worry too about how frequently we shove ambivalence and ambiguity aside. Ambivalence and ambiguity aren't necessarily signs of weakness or sins of indecision. They can be apt responses to events that we don't yet understand, with outcomes that we can't predict. But they don't make for bold sentences or tidy talking points. So we pundits are merchants of certitude in a world where much is in doubt and many questions don't have one right answer. As such, we may be encouraging arrogance and unyieldingness in our readers, viewers, and listeners. And those attributes need no encouragement in America today. I don't miss the stodginess that defined a lot of news writing when I got into the business 3.5 decades ago. It reflected an unnatural emotional remove and an insistence on even-handedness that produced a kind of moral zombieism. But I miss nuance, which has been incinerated by today's hot takes. There aren't as many clicks in cooling tempers and complicating people's understandings of situations as there are in stoking their rage. Who can really be sure that trashing the filibuster is the gateway to governmental bliss? Who can be sure it isn't? I wish someone would write a great analysis of the filibuster that focused on two undeniable truths. We have no idea what the ultimate impact of such consequential change would be, and there are powerful arguments for and against it. On this issue and others, option A versus option B amounts to a coin flip. How many pundits say that? Too many columns are less sober analyses than snarky stand-up acts or primal screams. The stand-up and the screams sell. My column about Cruz was a little bit of both, and I wish I could take it back. Its useful observations about his nullifying lack of collegiality, about his noxious self-righteousness, were undercut by its hyperventilation. And I can't chide politicians for ungracious manners and unsubtle minds if those inadequacies are also my own.
Each week, we make time in the service for meditation. Today's meditation will be musical. So please find a comfortable position. If you feel comfortable doing it, you may close your eyes. And let's all take a deep breath in and let it out gently and slowly. I find once is never enough. Let's do that again.
Friends, create a container with your arms and open up your own moral imagination. Visualize the words, behaviors, gestures, and impulses that bring forth a new world that Blackness can return safely to. Let us create a vaccine for the contagion of white supremacy. Let's replace the symptoms of perfections with the cure of appreciation. Can you see that? Let us replace the urgency of white supremacy culture with measured discernment. Let us acknowledge our fear and relinquish defensiveness. Let us replace the characteristic of objectivity with particularity. Let us replace the characteristic of power hoarding with sharing and listening. Let us replace the characteristic of fear and open conflict with honesty and authenticity. Let us replace the characteristic of paternalism with real mutual regard. Let us stop thinking there's only one right way and cultivate cultural humility. If we do this, we will replace some of our individualism with communion. Friends, create a container.
I just want to say that the music that you heard during the meditation is called Towards the One, written in 2013 for me by David Gilbert. And David says about this piece, Towards the One for solo piano is a short, lyrically meditative piece in the spirit of a Chopin prelude. It takes its inspiration from the great Persian poet Rumi and his personal journey towards the unity of it all. And it was written for a program in Carnegie Hall that actually had 16 world premieres that evening. It was a celebration of contemporary composers. As many of you know, I just celebrated a milestone birthday. I always assumed that getting older and hopefully wiser would involve a process of synthesis and simplification, that all of the bewildering variety and complexity which one encounters when young would eventually coalesce into simpler universals and truths. While to some extent, and in some instances this has happened, I've been surprised by an interesting corollary. Instead of things getting simpler, they've actually gained in complexity. I have learned that some things that were put forth as simple truths within the context of a body of information espoused and disseminated by books and teachers were actually at their core more complex and sometimes just plain falsehoods and myths. And somewhat disturbingly, I have discovered that self-education and the quest for truth is far from the passive process of digesting in an unexamined and unquestioning fashion information put forth by established schools and pedigreed experts. For me, the search for truth hasn't become easier. It requires more energy, diligence, and intellectual skepticism than ever before. And the fruits of that search tend not to be simple and cohesive, but complex and ephemeral. If anything, the challenge has intensified.
Good morning. My name is Kristen Blumel, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood. I support USR with my time and my money because I believe in who we are and what we do. This summer, one of the things that we are doing is restarting our Share the Plate offering 50% of our Sunday collection will go to an organization whose mission we endorse. The other 50% supports the mission and activities of USR. During July and August, we will be sharing the plate with the Center for Food Action, as Jack told us at the beginning of service. This summer is always a hard time at CFA, and this summer will be harder than usual due to the lingering effects of the pandemic. Even if you regularly give to USR by other means, please take the opportunity this Sunday to donate and share the plate with others. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
I rejoice. Well, let me say first, that was some piece of music. And secondly, let me say thanks to Ron Levy for his sharing about how the journey to wisdom is a journey from perhaps simplicity towards complexity, and how so much of what we thought we knew turns out not to be knowledge. I rejoice in my journey to call myself a Unitarian Universalist. To the extent that my theology matters, I agree with both of those U's. U for Universalist, as in love wins, and Unitarian, as in one God at most. And here at USR, I find my views on justice reflected back to me. At the same time, I'm happy to be speaking today about a topic worth disagreeing with. As Frank Bruni said, ambivalence and ambiguity can be apt responses to events we don't yet understand, with outcomes we can't predict. And when we're dealing with subjects where much is in doubt and many questions don't have one right answer, there's not only room for disagreement, there's an absolute need for disagreement. Can I say it? Sometimes UUs are too polite. We agree too much. We too are subject to herd mentality. World Population Day raises issues that truly demand ambivalence and ambiguity. There really are few simple answers, and yet we need to struggle our way into this thicket of complex and interrelated realities if we hope to make sense of the world we are leaving to the next generations. To make this journey, we must, as Reverend Karen Hutt told the UUA General Assembly 2 weeks ago, Acknowledge our fear and relinquish defensiveness. Replace the characteristic of objectivity with particularity. Replace the characteristic of power hoarding with sharing and listening. Replace the characteristic of fear of open conflict with honesty and authenticity. Replace the characteristic of paternalism with real mutual regard. And let us stop thinking there's only one right way and cultivate cultural humility. As I have learned again and again, cultural humility is a very precious commodity, especially among the intellectual spiritualities. We think so clearly that we are usually so right. Malthus was wrong, and so were the predictions of the population bomb. It turns out we can feed a much larger population than was previously thought. But why are so many people hungry today? It has to do, I think, with greed, nationalism, and white supremacy, more than agricultural technology. The UN has been working on global development goals to eliminate poverty, but that progress has been set back by the pandemic. It's too early to tell what the pandemic's impact will be on world population, but some preliminary data show decreased birth rates in addition to the excess deaths. What will the results be? Nobody knows yet. What we do know is that the impact has been far from uniform. Those who can least afford it suffered most, and those who were well off before did even better during the pandemic. The human history of population control has at various times and places included eugenics, infanticide, pro-natalist schemes, restrictive immigration, genocide, and family planning. And our Unitarian and Universalist history is as complicated as any predominantly white and dominant class religion can be. We've put together a little bit of our own history, and I'd like you to listen to this, take a look at our own readers, and wonder at the history.
At the end of the 19th century, many liberals saw hope in the new science of eugenics as it embodied a kind of evolutionary optimism. Many believed that the births of stronger, smarter, and even more attractive babies would signal the coming salvation of the world. In the ensuing decades, prominent religious liberals became enthusiasts for eugenics. Their stories reflect our faith in science and how our hopes for a better world can engender gross violations of human freedoms and rights.
Unitarian Universalists today, who uphold the inherent worth and dignity of every person as their first principle, would be shocked to read the title of a book published in 1902 by the American Unitarian Association, The Blood of the Nation, a Study of the Decay of Races Through the Survival of the Unfit. The author was David Starr Jordan, president of Stanford University. Jordan was a pacifist, raised in a Universalist household, but Jordan's pacifism was based on a belief that war is a biological evil. It kills off the physically and mentally fit and leaves behind the less fit. He declared that poverty, dirt, and crime produced poor human material. It is not the strength of the strong, but the weakness of the weak which engenders exploitation and tyranny, he wrote in The Heredity of Richard Roe. Weak people bring failure upon themselves and ultimately will bring failure on the nations they live in if they are the ones who survive and reproduce. War, Jordan believed, robs the race of its most vital blood.
In 1924, a Virginia law aimed at the sterilization of the unfit to prevent the passing on of their genetic heritage was tested with the case of Carrie Buck. Carrie Buck was scheduled to be sterilized under the new law. She had been raised in foster care, been raped, became pregnant, and given birth all before the age of 17. She was considered part of a shiftless, ignorant, and worthless class. The judge ruled the operation should be done. Appeals eventually took it to the Supreme Court. Unitarians Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. and William Howard Taft voted with the majority, upholding the ruling, with Holmes writing the decision. These are Holmes's words.
We have seen more than once that the public welfare may call upon the best citizens for their lives. It would be strange if it could not call upon those who already sap the strength of the state for these lesser sacrifices. It is better for all the world if, instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime, or to let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough.
In the early 20th century, progressives, including a number of Unitarians, were very enthusiastic about eugenics. Clergy inspected prospective couples for marriage to make sure they were normal physically and mentally. The great Unitarian activist John Haynes Holmes encouraged his fellow ministers in the Liberal Ministers Association of New York to perform nothing but healthy marriages for the conservation of the normal family, so that in the interest of improving society, defectives did not propagate. John Haynes Holmes wrote,
Nothing is more important, to my mind, in our modern treatment of the question of marriage than to use our powers of social control to prevent many people from marrying. Those, namely, whose marriage, for one reason or another, can be nothing but a tragedy.
When the Universalists passed their Declaration of Social Principles in 1917, its working program included the following. We want to safeguard marriage so that every child shall be born with a sound physical, mental, and moral heritage. Birth control or even sterilization were ways to control indiscriminate breeding. When Clarence Russell Skinner, the great Universalist social activist, published The Social Implication of Universalism, he declared,
The new enthusiasm for humanity readily pictures a time when, through eugenics, education, friendship, play, worship, and work, the criminal will be no more.
Throughout the United States, sermon contests were held on the subject of better breeding. Sponsored by the American Eugenics Society, the contests had a central theme: religion and eugenics. Does the church have any responsibility for improving the human stock? One participant in 1928 was Homer Gleason of the First Universalist Church in Rochester, Minnesota. He wrote to the society,
Please allow me to add that I have greatly enjoyed my preparation for this work. I have thought for years that I was somewhat of a eugenist, but 5 months of intensive study have thoroughly convinced me. Surely this is a great cause.
Many progressives were also organizing to restrict immigration of what they perceived as inferior peoples. They declared a need to preserve the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant heritage in the face of new lower classes of immigrants, especially those who were not Protestants.
Today, it probably surprises us that some Unitarian and Universalists supported eugenics. We generally think our faith empowers us to speak for those who otherwise have no voice and to advocate for those who cannot advocate for themselves.
Even today, we UUs sometimes chime in with our ready answers to the world's problems. It makes me wonder which ones may embarrass us if we live long enough to look back on them. Consider this response from a UU ecological justice minister in 2017. He was asked what the most effective solution might be for overpopulation. He replied, global warming. An asteroid strike or a nuclear winter might also do the job, but we can't depend on either to occur. On the other hand, global warming is the solution that will arise naturally because we won't face the problem. In the unlikely event that we do face the problem, it is likely that we have already passed the point of no return. Now, I agree that the climate crisis is critical for the survival of life that resembles anything we imagine as life, but I sense a certain delectation in the Rev's imagining of how an asteroid strike or nuclear winter might do the job. Or I invite you to consider that heavy metal piece that I chose for the offertory. Selfish has the refrain, "World population is out of control," repeated again and again, and it blames selfish people who have too many children. That's too simple an explanation for our problems, I'm afraid. Call to mind the image that I use. I chose it in that video for that unlistenable music. I was grabbed by the picture of that massive overburdened truck. I first met it as the frontispiece of Alan Weisman's book, Countdown, Our Last Best Hope for a Future on Earth. Like Weisman, I took it to be a graphic metaphor for the overcrowding of our planet. But it's so much more complicated than that. The photographer, Roberta Neumeier, says that those temporary workers carpooling home from jobs in Libya with goods they'd purchased with their wages were actually wealthy traders returning home. It is not a horde of refugees planning to cross the Mediterranean to invade and pillage Europe. They are not less than human objects to warn us of the dangers of overpopulation. Now, I still think it's a great image of overcrowding, but I wonder what it says about me that I chose a picture of Africans crowded onto that truck. It may be that white racism is deeply embedded behind my own views of world population. I don't know about you. I don't have answers today. I want to say that every person counts. Population is an abstract, aggregative concept, but real answers come from understanding problems in their particularity, from letting go of what we know and learning to listen. Our first principle declares the inherent worth and dignity of every person. If we give that principle more than lip service, I ask you, what are we doing today and planning for tomorrow that proves this is indeed our first principle? Does every person count? Or are we like some politicians, just as happy to ignore some people when taking a census? In the end, there is no solution to world population, as though if I could just get people to see it my way, the problem would go away. The only way to make every person count is to know and love all the individuals we can, affirming their inherent worth and dignity. I look forward to doing that with you as we return in person to meetings on Sundays and as we move out into the world together. As I conclude, I'm thinking about Rodney King. You remember him and what some people have called his prayer. Why can't we all just get along? He said it in a press conference during the 1992 LA insurrection following the acquittal of his police attackers. Folk singer Fred Small, who is now Minister for Climate Justice at Arlington Street UU Church in Boston, called it Rodney King's blessing. And in his song, he strings together King's words at the press conference with the refrain, "People, can we all get along? We can all get along. People, you know, we're all stuck here for a while. Let's try to work it out." Psalm 133 says it's a beautiful thing when sisters and brothers dwell together in unity. That's the vision that I want to hold up on World Population Day, with thanks to our singers.
שבט אחים גם יחד
So sisters and brothers, there's a lot of work ahead of us. We're all stuck here for a while. And while we're here, we can make a difference through who we are and how we act. So may it be.
Please join us in singing our hymn, number 110, Come, Children of Tomorrow. Ron will play it through once. Come, children of tomorrow, come, new glory dawns upon the world. The warring banners must be furled, the earth become our common home. From plain and field and town their sound, the
the love that is our common speech, the comrade cry of each to each is calling us to humanhood.
Please join us in the words for extinguishing the chalice. They can be found on your screen. We extinguish the flame, but may the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action burn bright in our hearts until we are together again.
And so may it be.